Hello and welcome back to my basement. This is Jeremiah Wolf, and I am coming at you today to talk a little bit about Cisco systems. And to do it in fine style, I am wearing my middle-aged man forest green stained pocket tee. Comfort above all else. Now you might be asking yourself, Jeremiah, is that an Amazon Basics pocket tee? And I won't say if it is or if it isn't, but it might be. It might be. I like to live in style and comfort. Okay, moving on. So I want to talk today about something really interesting. Cisco is now among the top 10 global software companies. Their most recent report puts them as one of the largest software companies in the world, and this might be surprising to a lot of people. I want to talk a little bit about the number. We'll go over the numbers first, real quick, and then I want to talk a little bit about what does that mean. What does that mean for you? What does that mean for your career in networking? Is this good news? Is this worrisome? So we're going to talk about that. Let's go ahead and take a look at the article. Now, this is from sdxcentral.com, and I will link to the article in the description below. But let's go ahead and take a look. So, software sales surpassed $4 billion and accounted for almost 31% of Cisco's total revenue during the first fiscal year 2021 fourth quarter. Excuse me, I kind of messed that up. During fourth quarter of this year. So that usually ends in June, I believe. June or July, I forget. So 6% year-over-year increase in software revenue. Software subscriptions grew by 9% from a year ago. And this part is particularly interesting. Well, the next two pieces are particularly interesting. First off, this is CEO Chuck Robbins said, for perspective, software represented 31% of our business in Q4, and for the full year, when combined with our services business, they represent over 53% of revenue. Again, that's CEO Chuck Robbins. So software and services now account for the majority of Cisco revenue. It's no longer a hardware company. It's now a software and services company. And this part is particularly interesting. Cisco said 81% of that $4 billion, that's the $4 billion in software sales from this quarter, is recurring revenue. Recurring revenue. And that tells you right there why Cisco is becoming a software company. That's where companies want to be. And we've talked about this a little bit in the past, that this is where companies want to be. Until recently, I was a small business owner, and before I decided to get back into networking. And one of the things that I really struggled with as a small business owner is it cost me so much money to acquire each new client. So I would get a new client. I would work with that client for a couple of months. We'd help them to reach their goals. They would pay me for the process, and then they'd go on their way. And if I did my job well, I wouldn't see them again at all, or maybe for a couple years. They might come back when they had some new goals in mind. So I spent a lot of money getting clients. And as a business, that really kills your bottom line. What you want, obviously, is you want to get a client once and then just keep the money coming in. So you want those subscriptions. And I tried, for my business, I tried to come up with ways, ethical ways, of kind of creating any sort of subscription service. And I really struggled. Just my business just didn't really suit itself well for that. And that's kind of where Cisco was just a few years ago. They're putting massive amounts of money into research and development, and they're spending all kinds of money in acquiring new customers and clients. They make the sale, And then the hardware sits there for 10 years just doing its thing. I mean, how many companies really have the money to refresh the network every couple of years? Most companies don't. And that's not good for Cisco's bottom line. What kind of choices do you have? Well, you have the sort of Apple approach, and the Apple approach is, engineered obsolescence, where you create a device that is designed to kind of wear out in just a couple of years, and then you work to create the culture where people are accepting of that and say, oh yeah, no, a phone should only last, a $1,200 phone, yeah, that should only last a couple years, and then I'll go buy a new phone. And people are okay with that. They seem to be, because they keep doing it. But you're not going to. But you're not really going to get that in business. Business wants stuff that lasts, especially when you're buying, thousands of dollars. A switch that's thousands of dollars. Or, I've literally installed switches, layer 3 switches that were. The bill of materials was $500,000 for one Cisco device. I mean, it was a chassis with a bunch of cards and stuff, but $500,000. I mean, come on. So, but that would sit there for years and years. I worked on I worked on the network of a service provider that was incredibly successful, just growing like crazy, and their entire network. Okay, this is crazy. Their entire network was built on almost exclusively end-of-life Cisco gear. Everything. If we needed a new switch, we needed a new router, we bought it from a used hardware vendor. Not usually off eBay, but thereabouts, right? And that's what the whole network of this incredibly successful service provider ran on. I mean, we covered half the United States, and it's a big company. It's still a big company, growing, incredibly successful company. I don't know what they're doing now, but a few years ago, it was all old end of life equipment. And you know what? They could do that because Cisco equipment worked. It worked well, and it would last. So, I have some switches in my lab that are like 12 years old. And, when I bought them, I plugged them in, they fired up, and they work great. So that's kind of the problem where Cisco's at. They need revenue without spending all the money to get the clients. And that's where, we see stuff like this, where now they're pushing for that software, because software they can charge subscriptions for, software they can bill for updates, and services naturally too. So that's where you want to be. If when you're looking at profit, you want to be in software and services. And if you look over, let's take a look at this. So we look at this article from Network World, 10 most powerful companies for enterprise networking. Naturally, Cisco is number one. VMware, Arista, HP. But there's one point in here. Sorry for scrolling and getting it all. Where's it at? I think it's under the... Well, I forget where it's at, but in here it basically says that Cisco has gone from like 80-something, almost 90% market share a little over a decade ago, to now being less than 50% market share, from 90% to 50% market share. Yet they're still the biggest. And, so when people see that, when they see that the market share is shrinking, a lot of people freak out. What's happening to Cisco? Is Cisco, are they no longer any good? Well, the deal is they're losing market share, but I think they're doing this intentionally. I think they made the conscious choice to do this, to lose market share, because they no longer want to be a hardware company. In fact, if you look at, they're starting to sell their silicon, their chips. Why? Because they can do the R&D and let somebody else, so they can do the R&D of the very highest margin component, the proprietary switching chips, and then sell those to anybody else. And, I think that's where we're headed. We're headed to a world, it's a little ways off, but I think we're headed to a world where you're going to buy a switch, and it's going to have the little Cisco inside logo, like the old, I don't know if they still do it, but the old Intel inside. I think that might be where we're headed. So what does this mean for you as someone who's studying, as someone who's trying to get certification, who's trying to grow their career? What does that mean for you? Well, first off, what I want to say is don't panic. Stay calm. Stay calm. Your career is not in jeopardy just yet. But the writing is on the wall, so it's time to start using your noggin and planning ahead. I'm going to do some predictions here, and this is based on my experience in the industry for 20 years, things I've seen. But you know what? I could be so completely wrong. When you look at the futurists, all right, the people that have been very successful at predicting the future. One of the ways that they're very successful is they're very vague and very wrong. And what they do is, they might have 5 misses for every 1 hit. But it's that 1 hit that gets headlines, and so they keep selling books, and they keep making appearances on news programs and whatever. So so predictions are a tricky business. But this is so what I think is going to happen. First off, okay, let's take a step back. Let's think about this. Cisco has, if you're in networking and you want to be a network engineer, or you're a networking engineer already and you want to expand your career, Cisco really has one of the best certification programs as far as their own training material, books, study material, practice tests, tests that are designed in such a way to really test your knowledge and to mean something, to have real meaning in the industry, so that when you get that certification, the hiring manager that sees your resume knows that means something, right? That's important. I think, from what I know, Juniper is a second. I think they're still a distant second, but they're catching up. They have a pretty good certification program also. But the point that I'm making is, if you're trying to learn networking, going the Cisco route is probably the best way, because you're going to have the best, the most broadest, the most well-developed, the most mature training material available. And the simple truth is, and I've said this before, if you're learning Cisco, you're learning networking. Yes, there are proprietary Cisco protocols that you will have to learn, but the simple truth is they are not as prominent as they once were. Cisco recognizes that the world has changed. They no longer have 90% market share. Most networks are not homogeneous. So you really can't use those Cisco protocols like maybe you could 5, 10, 15 years ago. Now you kind of got to use the standardized protocols, and that's reflected in the training. You will have to learn the Cisco proprietary, but mostly you're going to have to learn the standardized protocols. So Cisco training, still very good. Now, what about the future? So you're in networking, you're learning these things. What does this mean for your career? Well, what I think is going to happen is we are going to move away. In fact, we already are. You and I both know this. We already are moving away from command line. That's just, the command line is going to go away, and we're going to move almost exclusively into management applications and APIs. And you're going to have to learn both of those. Now, the management application, that's going to be unique for each system, for each vendor. They change all the time, but really that doesn't matter if you know the underlying technology. If you understand the technology, then it's just a matter of finding the right checkbox within the management application. So I don't think that that's a bad thing. If anything, it might be a good thing because it means that as we move forward, what we're going to find is that you naturally become more and more vendor agnostic. Now, this is something that you would have had to work at previously. Back in the day, I worked on 3 or 4 different vendors of equipment. It was almost mostly Cisco with a bit of Juniper. Those were the two. I was very comfortable with Cisco. I was comfortable with Juniper, and I did a couple other things where, it would come up and I'd have to, figure it out, and it would be a rare thing. And that's kind of how most people's careers have been. They get into a shop or they get into a company that uses a brand. They learn that brand very well. They have to learn a little bit about other vendors, but mostly, 1 or 2 things. As we move forward, though, because everything is moving to standardized protocols and everything is moving to management applications, the learning all the syntax is going to mostly go away. And, what we're seeing is, like I said, management applications, but then also when you look at the API side, because we're moving toward, APIs for everything, this is forcing network vendors to once again start to use more standardized Yang models. So, we're going to see more and more of these standardized Yang models with a few, vendor-specific Yang, what are they called, templates, or I forget. So you're gonna learn Yang, you're gonna learn NetConf, you're gonna learn REST. You're gonna learn these things, and it's going to get to the point where if you can do it on Cisco, you can do it on Juniper. There might be a little bit of difference, that you got to learn, but it's going to be minor. We're going to be moving more and more to this sort of vendor neutral thing. So on one hand, that's good for you because you're already learning the underlying technology. On the other hand, that makes our skill set more and more commoditized. And once something becomes commoditized, it doesn't pay very well. So, 20 years ago, if you were, 20 years ago, if you were a Microsoft administrator, you knew how to do a Microsoft domain, you could demand a pretty good salary. Today, not really. It's a pretty standard thing. You have to know cloud. You have to know other things to kind of keep demanding a good salary. You got to have a much broader skill set. You're not going to be just a Microsoft guy and still make the big bucks, unless you're doing if you're really you really know Azure or something. I know that is a thing, but. That's kind of where it is. It's like back in the day, Cisco guys. I used to be one of the Cisco guys in the early 2000s. It was this golden age of Cisco, and you said, he's a Cisco guy, and it was like heads would turn, and you were special, and somehow because you knew Cisco, you were better than other people, smarter than other people. It was a great time to be in networking. Those times are over. There's always going to be the technology, and it's really hard for people to constantly be riding that wave, because eventually you learn a technology so well that it's going to be hard for you to kind of find the time and whatever to learn new technology. So okay, we're getting kind of off whatever here, and I want to wrap this up. So let's take a look over there we go. Yeah, okay, good enough. All right, so what does this mean for your career? Let's just draw a couple things out. Now, what we're going to see start happening is so this is how do we want to do this? This is This is number of jobs. And this is... No, that's not... Let's do this. This is going to be the number of jobs. And this is going to be skill. And what we're going to see is something interesting, I think. So what we're going to see in networking, so this is networking. What we're going to see is that with low skill, oh, I did this backwards. All right, we'll just draw it backwards. No, I did it all backwards. All right. This is jobs. This is skill. Here we go. Maybe I should try planning these things out. So what we're going to see, well, let's do this. What we see right now is we see at a low skill, there are lots of jobs. And then as your skill level increases, those jobs diminish. Right? And then these people make some money, these people make more money, and these people make lots of money, right? Oops. Can I undo that? Anyway, I hit the wrong button. Let's do this again. So again, this is skill, or this is jobs. This is skill. But what we're going to see is something really interesting. We're going to see lots of low-skill jobs, but then it's going to drop way off. And there's going to be very few medium-skilled jobs. And then you're going to see an uptick in high-skill jobs. So this is high skill. This is low skill, right? So lots of jobs at the entry level. These people are going to be monitoring the network. They're going to be submitting change requests. They're going to be, doing the basic stuff of the network. All of this, these jobs are all going to go away. And it's all going to become automation. This is all going to be replaced by automation. This is the software that Cisco is selling. They're selling it now, and it's going to get better, and they're going to sell more of it. This is where all the jobs, or a good number of the jobs, are going to go away to. And then these high-skilled jobs are going to be in demand because these are going to be the high-end troubleshooters. Right? The automation can handle 95% of all the tasks in the network. 95% of all the problems. It's going to figure it out. So these people are going to input the desired state of the network, which was probably constructed by one of these guys. So these folks are troubleshooters and engineers. They design the network. They put it together, or they list how it's supposed to be, and then they hand that as a document over to these people. These people take that document and they input it into the software. The software then builds the network. If there's a problem, the software tells these people, hey, there's a problem. And 9 times out of 10, it's either just going to fix it itself, or they'll simply submit a job. They'll tell the software, okay, go ahead and fix the problem. Thanks for the recommendation. I looked at your recommendation software and I agree. Or management said, okay, go ahead and implement the fix. And the software is just going to take care of that. 5% of the time, we're going to submit a problem, and that problem's, we're not going to have a solution. And then in those instances, these folks are going to say, hey, we got a real problem. And then these folks are going to fix the problem directly, or they're going to write up the change, whatever it is. This is the future of networking. A lot of low-skilled, relatively low-paid people. The whole middle tier is now gone, effectively, and then a much smaller, higher tier of advanced folks. So what does that mean for your career? Well, for your career, what that means is you need to be getting over here. Now, the good news is you have some time. Not a lot. You don't have an infinite amount of time. In fact, I would argue that you have a couple of years to get yourself into a position where you're on that senior network engineer trajectory. I would argue that in 10 years, the path that I have drawn out here, this is where we're going to be in 10 years. Some companies are going to get here sooner. Some companies are going to get here later. But overall, I think we've got about 10 years to get solid in your career. So what does that mean for you? Again, that means, and we talk about this a lot when I talk about certification, that means you need to specialize. You need to get the advanced certifications. This, I see so many people who they list all of their pluses, right? They got Network Plus and Security Plus and Linux Plus and Sys, whatever it is, Plus and A Plus. And I think there's like 13 different pluses. And then they got the AWS entry level and the Google entry level and the Microsoft entry level. And so what are they in a position to do? They're in a position to take all their entry level knowledge and put it into a software management system. And then they're stuck. And here's the real problem. This is why this is such a problem, and you need to be aware of it now. Because in the past, that was okay. You start off, and you still have to. You still got to start somewhere. So you start off with the entry-level stuff. You do the entry-level stuff, and you slowly build your skill set. You get more advanced certifications, and you build your skill set, and and then you eventually work your way to tier 2 and tier 3 and senior, whatever. But what I'm saying is I suspect that path is going to be cut off. And to get from here to here is going to be very difficult. Because one, you're going to have a ton of competition. So in the past, as you were growing your career, there are people dropping out at every level along the way. I was watching a video last night about the Dutch frogmen, some kind of like special forces, and it was showing like their training regimen, or not their training, but they're like I forget, what do you call it, to get into the program, like the tests they have to go through to get in the program. And it's designed to eliminate 90-some% of all the people. So, on day one, There's some people that drop out because they can't handle, some aspect of it, and the PT gets harder, and then it gets harder, and people are dropping out. And that's how it happens in your career. There are some people that they can only ever get here, and some people can only ever get here, and etc. On and on. So you got to keep pushing yourself, and you got to make sure that you are one of those ones that end up here. That's hard to do. So, but in the past, as you got to a certain point, here you're competing against less people for training, for opportunities. Here you have less people you're competing against for training and opportunities, and so on and so on. But if the path is, let me clean this up. If the path is only step 1, step 2, like, how do you get from A to B? How do you get from 1 to 2? Well, that means you're competing against all of these people. Every one of them. They all want to make more money. They all want to have more, responsibility, more advancement, more prestige in the workplace. Like, everybody wants that. So you got to compete against all of those people. They're not going to be dropping off naturally. So it's going to get hard. I don't know what that looks like 10 years from now. I think what it's going to look like is basically you're going to find companies that will take a chance on some people. But I think a lot of companies, they're going to kind of rely on advanced degrees or you doing the work of getting your own certifications. I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. But what I do know is that doesn't really affect us now. You have the time to get some experience, to get training, to get your certifications, and start, working your way. So what I always say is specialize. You need to specialize. Get the advanced. You're doing wireless. Get the advanced wireless stuff. Go for your CCNP wireless, right? Go for your CCIE wireless or data center or security, whatever it is you're doing. Specialize. Don't get 13 different A+ certifications. Don't get, a million different entry-level things. You need to get a couple entry-level things to get you your job. Then you specialize to advance your career. And when you show that you can do that advanced stuff, you're eventually going to be able to get over here so that in 5 or 10 years, when this becomes the reality, you're in a position to benefit from that. This is one other thing that I always like to talk about. Actually, it's not relevant. Let's skip it. So that is, I got a cough here. Let me not cough in your ear. That is Cisco as a software company. That is the commoditization of networking equipment. We're going to see that as it becomes a commodity, the skill sets become less meaningful, the pay is going to be reduced, the competition for good jobs is going to increase, and it's going to fall more and more on you to distinguish yourself. The opportunities for training and for your career to handle your advancement, I think those days are going to start to dwindle, and it's going to fall on you. So I don't know. I could be 100% wrong, but I really am curious about your thoughts on the matter. So please, leave a comment, and hey, like the video, subscribe, do all that shit. All right, hey, this is Jeremiah. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.